Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Muhammad and Friends. Brothers and sisters, we are streaming live and we have an exciting show for you today. If you'd like to participate in today's conversation, please give us a call at 773-434-6625. And as always, please follow us on our social media platforms, which include Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to click on that subscribe button on our YouTube page so you can be notified whenever we're streaming live on the air. Brothers and sisters, we do have an exciting show for you today, but before we get into it, I wanted to open by sending my condolences to my family in Birmingham, Alabama. Yesterday morning, unfortunately, we lost our younger cousin to a victim of gun violence. He was only 15 years old in Birmingham, Alabama. Our younger cousin, Pharrell Jackson. And unfortunately, we all somehow are impacted by this. It just shows you, we have to begin to understand the value of life. A young life snuffed out at 15 years of age. But I pray that Allah comforts his parents and our family and give us all strength as we deal with his passing and remember the positive, radiant smile and the goodness of that young man's heart, and may Allah be pleased with him. And I know that it's difficult for the family, but so many of our people in our community have been in this situation as we've lost young life at the hands of gun violence, but I pray that Allah comforts his family. Brothers and sisters, on that note, I'm going to transition into the show. We have a beautiful brother and friend of CROE. He is the minister of Camden, from Camden, New Jersey's Muhammad's Temple number 20, and also host of Muhammad Speaks radio program. He is our friend and brother, Brother Minister Wasim Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Jamil. Always is a pleasure and an honor, and thanks for having me. And I do, as well as the member of Temple number 20, send our condolences to your family there in Alabama as well.
Yes, sir, brother. Thank you, beloved. Brother, it's always a pleasure to have you on. We have such delightful conversations, and things are always happening. As it is today, with so much in the news now, there are many places that we could start, but I want to kind of go back to you were recently one of the featured people. You were referenced in an article that was in Time magazine. It was entitled "America's Policing System is Broken. It's time to radically rethink public safety." And you sent that. It was a lengthy article. It was detailed, a lot of good information. So I'd like you to kind of give an overview about it and tell us about how you were contacted to participate in that story.
Yes, thank you, Brother Jamil. But if I may first open up in the name of Allah, who came in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, in the name of his last and greatest messenger, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I greet your audience and the CROE family and members who is doing such a wonderful, wonderful job of preserving the life-giving teachings, the legacy of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to talk about that Time magazine article that is timely news, unfortunately, with the death and murder of our dear Brother George Floyd at the hands of police, of that story that we hear in the black community and been hearing all so long and so too much. But that article, I think, in the Time magazine is also relevant to the story that you just shared in your opening commentary about your family member with public safety. This is in fact a conversation that we must continue to have, particularly in urban environments, but all across America, of the avenue of policing, the conversation of defunding policing and different words. And this is a conversation that we have to take a look at, because I think everybody in America of civilized society all want public safety, but we want a fair and honest and complete change to public safety where it comes to more of prevention and intervention rather than just policing, traditional policing that stem out of, slavery and the dark past of the American future. So we must change with time as if America is honest on its mark of making America different and better and for all, that we have to take a look at policing in America.
Yes, sir. And I know it's something that we've been dealing with. It's kind of at a fever pitch as far as awareness for we call police reform, because I think for so long we just accepted the disparity and the injustice as just a rites of passage. I think that every black father would tell his son, okay, this is how you function when the police stop you, or be aware. And it's a shame that you have to do that, but it became like a natural conversation, where as you were probably more surprised when you were treated respectfully than when you weren't. And so we see what happened with our brother George Floyd. We see the also with Breonna Taylor, and it kind of magnified all of that. It came into existence. And so we know that Camden has been pointed to as a model for police reform. And we've had Mayor Dana Red on the show, thanks to your relationship, and you've worked with her in talking about what went into that. But can you kind of, for our viewers who may not be familiar with the community policing program or format that you all have engaged in Camden, could you kind of talk a little bit about that and how it came to be?
Yes, sir. Thank you. About 8 years ago, Brother Jamil, and you all, the CROE family, was a part of this and guiding the storyline as Camden, New Jersey, for decades were getting a bum rap through, national media and media as being one of the most dangerous cities in America per capita of size. Very small in size, but right next to Philadelphia, metropolitan area here in South Jersey, with Camden being a hub of South Jersey. We were always ranking every year with, murder rates. So about 8 years ago, then, as you mentioned, Mayor Dana Red fell into some fiscal issues with Camden City policing and, the changing of guards. So what Camden did, they decided to disband the police department and then come up with a new model of policing, which is, in fact, that Camden stood down their entire police force and upscaled a new police force. And all of the community at the time and the members of the community got involved with trying to do a model of what we wanted policing to look like. And fortunately, Brother Minister Wasim Muhammad and the members of Muhammad's Temple of Islam, number 20 here in Camden, were a part of, of that conversation. We were fortunate to be a part of that conversation based on the work that we do here in our community. And, but we wanted the basis of that new community policing paradigm to be about community policing and what it was all about. And that Time magazine article is interesting because how I was pointed out is that I always said from the very beginning, as it was very controversial about, standing down a police department, coming from the life-giving teachings of Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that sometimes when things are so rotten from its core, decades of police brutality in the black community, Camden and other cities as well, decades of, entrenched, policing and good old boy networks, that sometimes you have to, start anew and just, get rid of the old system and the old world and the old ideas of things and start again, and you'll get a fresher start.
And as you speak of that, I want to reference a point in the article where, you said it was really a turning point or a low point. It was like crimes, we're used to shootings happening at night, in the middle of the night, overnight, but then they were happening in broad daylight. Much of what's happening here in Chicago right now. And you said that it was just all out, just chaos. But when you talk about community policing, because Camden was a city, of course, that had high unemployment, it was high crime statistics, as you stated earlier. How did you create the atmosphere for the community to be willing, along with the police, to sit down? I know it was the police force was, torn down, and I think it was taken over by the county, and you began to do that. But it still had to be some trust, that some skin in the game, so to speak, that the community had to put in order to have these conversations.
Yes.
And so, was that? And I know when you came to the table, I mean, was that Mayor Dana Red? Did she kind of drive that atmosphere of a collaborative spirit, or how did that come about?
Yeah, it was a collaborative spirit. Mayor Red, who was so very, very savvy of and well liked in the community and bringing people together. So I was one of the many people that she brought together at the table, but it was those who she brought together that had community credibility.
Yes,
And I think that was most important, that when they saw my face at the table, that because of the impact that the Nation of Islam for decades have had on the black community, that face became, something that's trusted in the community, because they know, what we as members of the Nation of Islam, our moral fortitude, our standards that we stand by, that the community begin to trust, as well as other stakeholders that were at the table. And I think that's important, bringing those people, so that our names that's on the line. And I do get it, that a lot of times when government entities want to bring, want certain influence of the cities and things that they want to do, they bring together certain preachers and community leaders, and that's how sometimes the community get disenfranchised. But this time, working together with a community like the Nation of Islam that was out in the community, out with the people. At that time, we weren't just talking about, public safety. That public safety was a 3 or 4-legged stool, that it had to be prevention and intervention. The language that we were talking, our brother minister and others were on the street, talking about our responsibility and our role. And Mayor Red would have, community forums called the Congress, with other preachers and different people in the community that were respected, and we begin to start having that conversation. You just can't throw distrust that members and people who the same community members who always messaging things, but yet the community is always feel kind of some kind of displeasure with, that right. You have to get the right stakeholders at the table. Yes, Brother Jamil, that is first.
Yes, sir, brother. We're going to go to the phone lines. I think we have a few callers, so I'll go to the lines. Caller, you're on the line with Minister Wasim.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
I want to tell y'all how much I value and appreciate this conversation, and the depth and the issues that you're talking about right now, because this is something that went beyond just the black community. This issue is all over America right now, in the light of the George Floyd protests and what's happening right now. One of the major conversation we're having in Birmingham right now is they did something Brother Wasim called a people's budget, and they're a group of people critically looking at the budget right now. And one of the things they talk about is defunding the police. And so with the question, first of all, I'd like to commend you on what you have done and what you continue to do. But I'd like to ask you, what do you see in terms of the difference between defunding the police and putting it in the hands of community folks, or community policing? Is there a difference? Is it the same? How are we to look at this? So in one part, we don't have abusive police, but in the other things, we don't have a city of chaos.
Well, Brother Clarence, before you leave the line, let me say this. I think part of the confusion stems from the broad term defund the police. Without a clear expectations, many cases it's more the reallocation of funds, of certain responsibilities, because the police have a broad set of responsibilities, but taking away some of those funds from the police department and reallocating them, whether it's the medical profession, whether it's social justice advocates, of other people who could do that job. So that's first and foremost. A lot of times, just the term defunding the police could be so broad that it presents a message to just like all out lawlessness, you know, that just
Right,
nothing
right.
exists. And so I think that's first and foremost, that the term itself, without any perspective, creates such a, I don't want to say a paranoia in a dismissive thing, but it just presents itself in a way that it just seems like it'll be void of any rules or order or standards at all. And I wanted to just say that while you're on the air, and I'll let Brother Minister Wasim talk more about the experiences, what they've seen, what they've experienced in Camden.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your question, my dear brother. And Brother Jamil, you are right on it. You know, I think language is everything, and that's why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you know, urged us so much to learn the King's English and learn the value of words and our lessons that he gave us to study, that are divine in nature and that are universal in any conversation. That language, you are said, if you want to, you know, not get the idea of reallocating funds towards policing, keep using that language and you're going to turn people off. So I think you hit the nail right on the head, Brother Jamil. But, you know, what I've seen here in Camden, particularly, and I don't know about other cities, that one thing we have to be very careful of who's messaging that message of defunding the police or really reallocating funds. What I find in so many urban communities, as we talk about, you know, people who are poverty pimps and, you know, bloodsuckers of our community for many, many decades, that we see so much in our community, that language seems to be that it's picking up, that so that people who really have really no intentions and that are looking, and I want to go back to what we said about credible messengers, Brother Jamil, that language is so very, very important, because it's about who's the person, the message, and the messenger, the person who's bringing the message to the people. If it's the same group of people who've always tried to reallocate funds to get funds, you know what they say about those of us who are in the cloth in the black community, that the only time that many preachers and many other individuals come around is when there's something in it for themselves. See, the credible messenger that you're looking at in Brother Minister Wasim Muhammad, as a student and follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, like all of us are, we're constantly working in our community towards public safety, our whole work, what you all are doing there in CROE, giving out the proper information to our people every day, 5 days a week in Chicago, three or four times a week around the country. That is a part of public safety, because if mainstream media is the only media source that's giving the information to our people, then you'll see that they have never been too much of a friend of ours, because they only give out negative media and negative storylines that ill affect the black community. So it's about that messenger who are saying that, of course, we should put more money into prevention and intervention, so that police can do what is already written of their job, which is on the books through legislation and, you know, different city municipalities that they have. But that language of defunding the police, we have to be very careful about it. And we have to be those in the community that's speaking that language, who are credible in their work, and that we just can't start because of the rise of the atmosphere of the Black Lives Matter movement, that Black lives should have been mattering in our community before George Floyd, because we have so many other cases of George Floyd that you mentioned, of our sister Breonna Taylor and so many that lost their lives in dealing with police.
Yes, sir, and I agree with your point. We need credible messengers because even with the whole thing of defunding the police, usually the first lead story is about a protest or some violent or confrontational protest. You get excerpt of that, then you go to the defund the police, and to the average person, it's like, okay, well then who's going to control this crowd or who's going to do this and that? But when you look at the fact, and I think even in the Time article, it was referenced that about 20% of the people in jail really have mental health issues. And what if some of those funds were reallocated towards mental health and treatment and service proactively that could have eliminated that? That's the kind of things that we're talking about when you say defund the police, to reallocate it to a group that's better equipped to help with situations that policing has ventured off into. And so it's a lot of discussion about that. It's going to look different in a lot of different municipalities, but it's something that credible leadership and voices from the black community have to be at the table in order to have that discussion. So do that. I want to go to the line. I think we have another caller. Caller, you're on the line with myself and Minister Wasim.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Jamil. It's Sister Nora Muhammad calling from Camden, New Jersey.
Wa alaikum salam, my dear sister.
And assalamu alaikum, Brother Minister. It is a great conversation that you brothers are having. And Brother Jamil, actually, my question pertains to something that you just said. You know, reallocating funds to organizations who may be better equipped to manage some of the challenges we see in our community. I would like to hear from you brothers, who would that be? Because if those programs exist, they wouldn't need to wait until they had funding. If the need is present, the will of the people should be enough to mitigate some of these challenges, the drug abuse, the alcoholism, and the shootings and the killings. Our young people are just wild in the street with very little guidance. So who would be those individuals? If we don't want the police to respond, who can we reallocate those funds to who are credible, who's been doing great work in the community?
Yes, sister, thank you for that. And I'll start here. I know in the city of Chicago, there are a lot of organizations, and I'll say this. First and foremost, when I look at that, I try to go to the community and get feedback. Who's in the community actually doing the work? Not who's getting the headlines, but who's in the community doing the work. And there are a lot of organizations that have programs, whether it's mentoring, whether it's, and I'll give you an example. Here at CROE, we, and this was in the past, we used to have more of a mentoring program for young men in particular that used to come by. But what we found was that parents wanted to drop the children off, but did not want to participate in the accountability, in the growth, in the structure of it. And so it left the burden to someone else to do these kind of things, but there was no support system from the parents of the home to maintain that structure. Or if they didn't want to learn or at least be aware or familiar with certain things, they would kind of just pull it back. And so that search, I can't name just organizations randomly, but there are more organizations at the grassroots levels who would do that. And I say that whatever organizations, they would have to have a degree of transparency, because you have to be accountable. Because, sister, and I think one of the points you're alluding to, there are a lot of organizations who get grants and funds for social programs that are not based in the community. They're not manned and operated by people in the community. And so there's not a trace to where those funds are going or how they're being allocated and utilized in the community to make a difference. And so I would say that in this effort, that as a community, we have to see who's doing what in the community as real tangible sources, to have our own criteria that we can measure the results, and then say, hey, if they could do this with no funding, if we could get additional funds or pool our resources to give them the equipment, resources, and tools that they need to do it even on a larger scale, then let's go with that model. But I'll give you an example. Billions, well, I'll say millions and millions of funds have been given to, and I'll just say Black Lives Matter. And I don't know the level of transparency where we can see where those funds and how they're allocated and distributed throughout the community at the grassroots levels. But I mean, there should be some accountability as far as the leadership to come before the people that you could ask those questions to or could share that information. And I would say that any organization or social reform organization that wants to do something but will not come before the people or have an identifiable contact to show that transparency or stand by their record of what they're doing in the community and how those things are allocated, they should be disqualified from consideration. Period. Yes, sir, brother.
Yes, sir, Brother Jamil. I think you once again is right on point. And I also would like to add to that of those grassroots organizations that a lot of our grassroots organizations should get technical assistance by their cities because most of the time, black folks, we've been so pushed out of the system. Sometimes we do things without, the transparency and the requirements and technical things that most government entities will allow. So many of us are doing great work in our community, but we don't have a paper trail. We don't have things that most organizations, most businesses, all of those things must have in order to get certain kind of funding, let alone major funding. So I would say that, the black community and brown community, we know who's doing the work in our community. We know who's the chatter. We know who's a part of the work, and we know who's just, sent in by our enemy just to cause confusion and make sure that, that our people are always contentious, with each other. So I think that if different leaderships and communities would like to outreach to local grassroots organizations that they know are doing great and amazing work and give those young brothers and sisters the technical assistance that they need, it can help major cities because we know what Pookie and Ray and Malik and them are doing in our community. We have relationships with them already. We know what's going on in our community, that we are very valuable resources to us, but all we have to do is come together and get the technical support that we need, because that's the onus on all organizations that receive government funding or grants and different things like that. And so many of us, I remember having this conversation with your father and Dr. Tyrone Powers for years of the work that we were doing here in Camden. They just kept saying, make sure that your books and everything is in order, because of the fact that's how so many mainstream or grassroots organizations get defunded and at that excuse by government entities. But the work got to go on. Brother Jamil, you and I grew up in communities where our neighbors didn't look for funding to be a neighbor. They just went and they outreach to the community. They were mentors there in the community. We put our nickels and dimes together, and the neighborhood was that. And I think that I'm a great person when it comes to of doing the work. If we do the work, then others will help us. If we're just doing the work out of our kindness and our heart and what's the need and necessary in our community, that we fed up with mental illness, we fed up with drug abuse, we fed up with drug dealing in our community. If we just come together as a community and be humane about it, I think good things always happen to good people, to be in good places at good time if we're doing the work. Sometimes we're not in those spaces because we're not in a position to receive a blessing, because we always sitting on the sideline talking about we shoulda, coulda, woulda, and didda, but won't do it.
Yes, sir, brother. And also, I think it's in that same spirit to build upon that is that when we talk about volunteerism with our community or donations, it's not just money, but your talent. If you're in an accountant, why not volunteer at an organization to make sure and help them align their books to make sure things are all right? Whatever your talent and skill is, line up with an organization to offer your talent or skill to an organization that may not be their strength. That way, we have ownership and accountability in our community, and we're helping each other, because when it comes from within, you don't get confused about what the goal is. And many times, and what we say is the narrative gets hijacked, or You let other people who may not have the same aligned interests guide you and lead you and help you, and they may take you astray, either willingly or unwillingly. You may not know it. And so, therefore, we want to talk about those of us who have talent, skills, and resources to look to help those organizations in your community who you see are doing the work but could benefit from our collective assistance, because that's the way you build the community up and really begin to pool our resources. So,
Yes, sir. And I think you absolutely right, Brother Jamal. Just take, for example, us here in Camden, when Mayor Red, got into office, when they drove up and down Haddon Avenue, they already saw us functioning. They already saw us doing, as you see, you've been following us, Brother Jamil, and the members of CROE for the 12 years that we've been back on our posts, that you saw us out on the street, with our people, whether we were teaching the civilizing teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or telling our people that we should not, which is this part of the civilizing teachings, that we should not, gun violence should be unacceptable in our community, that we should find a way through those in the community, as was when we grew up, to work out our differences and our beefs, and have someone who we trust in our community to stand in between the knives and the guns, so there wouldn't be any more gun violence in our community. So when they drove down Haddon Avenue, they saw us functioning, a body already, not going around waiting to say that government should do and this person should do. We were doing. And so that contentious conversation that goes on in all Black community or brown community, why that group? Well, get to work. And why not that group? When you're getting the work, you're already doing the work. And this is what we've said here in Camden. Why not Temple number 20? We're already doing the work. We're already involved in educating our children. We're already involved with creating a safe space for our neighborhood and our sisters and brothers and mothers and uncles and aunts to be able to walk down the street. We've been doing it for years, for decades, and why not? That's why we say that.
Brother, before we take a break, I don't want to underscore the value and importance of Mayor Dana Red. And what I want you to talk about, because you mentioned the point of doing the work, but it takes an elected official or someone in the community that not only loves the people and the community, but recognize who's doing what in the community and has the courage to bring them to the table. So tell me about the overall, just tell me about Mayor Dana Red. I know that she's a native of Camden, homegrown, so she loved the community, but what is it about her that gave her the ability not only to recognize the credible leaders in the Camden community, but to have the credibility and courage to drive that collaborative spirit in order to bring these things into fruition?
I'd say it again, Brother Jamil, that's amazing, and that's one of her strong points, of being able to solve problems and issues, and that's what we want our elected officials to do. And they want to use that acronym, by any means necessary. That I think sometimes that it works. It works when it can, but it don't work in leadership too much, because if you're a leader and you say by any means necessary, as a leader, we want you to have the means necessary. Right. And that's working with credible people in our community. But Mayor Red was willing, to bring people who have been controversial in the community, particularly like the members of the Nation of Islam, to the table, because they saw us doing the work in our community, and they see us as civilized individuals. And of course, it was controversial in the beginning, but once people begin to sit down with us, and you see Sister Noor Muhammad, she can disarm anybody with the truth. That don't mean that we have to, I think an issue with most organizations that come from a Black perspective, that we think that we make activism one part of the movement, and that's just a part of the movement, the activism, being an activist. But there's another part in the movement called, getting the work done, which we call getting involved in policies and creating policies and, in making things happen and forming those policies out and making things happen. I think sometimes that's what we fall short at in the black community, because all we know is, standing. We think that activism is with a bullhorn and calling people names and saying things to people and pointing out truth to power. But we also have to, activism is getting involved in setting policies and programs up to get things done and to actively get a part of the things done. So I think she's an amazing leader, and she encouraged other leaders. So her opening doors like that has encouraged other leaders here throughout the city of Camden, throughout the county of Camden. She put us together with other clergy so that clergy wouldn't hear and get their sanitized news just from what they hear in mainstream media about the Muslim, about those of us who are conscious about our black awareness, that they were getting it directly from us, and we were having conversations with them. And I think that is most important. Get to know us, get to know our community. You there in Chicago, Brother Manir, this is why so many doors that you are all in, because the community get to see you all on media and social media, interacting with different people in the community, politicians, business persons, state legislators, all of those things. And they see that we can have conversation, civilized conversation with them, instead of from a contentious point of view that we still think that we got to argue to get in the room. We got to make noise to get in the room. Well, we're in the room now. We're at the table. Now, what can you do being there at the table? What do you bring? What policies can you make? What can you perform? What duties can you perform? And that's what it's all about now.
Let me ask you and go back a little bit, because I love what you said, and I hope we have some of our local elected officials watching as well. When you talked about Mayor Red, I know that initially, probably her ideas seem radical. A lot of times they don't have support when it's not, the normal thing that you do. So tell me how the community, some of you who were at the table, but the greater community were able to embrace and support her, because what you hear from a lot of elected officials, they want to do things, but they need that support from the community. And I know that, Mayor Red, her credibility was there, but what did support look like from the community for her in this initiative?
Well, Mayor Red, and I encourage all leaders in policy making and community legislators, people who are in government offices and holding positions. Mayor Red would have 2 monthly meetings, one with clergy and one with clergy and stakeholders in the community, residents, whether they were concerned residents, whether they were business persons, whether they were policymakers. She brought us all together every month, and most of her policies, she would have us at the table in certain changes that she wanted to make, in certain different maneuvers she wanted to make. We were all there and were informed about it. I believe, CROE, you all were there at one of those community meetings earlier in her administration at the time. She kept us up to date. So when things that were controversial in nature, opposition couldn't put their spin on it, because Mayor Red was walking them through monthly the conversation, what she wanted to do with education, what she wanted to do with policing. So by the time it hit the community, the opposition and those who are always wanting to oppose, like, for example, now that Camden is getting a beautiful story about its policing, being an example to the world after decades, Brother Jamil, of Camden getting the most dangerous city, acronym throughout national news. You would think that the people and the community and residents of Camden would embrace that. And most of us are. But there's a group of us who they don't like a good story, because the good story can't make them relevant, because they're stuck in, just in the contentious part of making noise. And as old James Brown's tune say, making noise and saying nothing loud. So they stuck in that. So by the time those messages got to those groups, they had very, very little outcry or response to him, because Mayor Red kept her people informed of what she was doing and made them a part of her policy making and conversation that we could share what it was that she was doing. I think that was most important in her administration.
Oh, beautiful, brother. So, brother, we're going to take a quick break, okay? We'll come back. Brothers and sisters, we're going to take a quick break and come back on the other side with a more interesting conversation from Brother Minister Wasim Muhammad. And remember, this is a live call-in show. Give us a call at 773-434-6625. I'm looking forward to speaking to you on the other side. We'll be right back.
It's against your own health. That how creates more diseases in your body than you have any dreams of. In fact, about it, stop eating the hog, eat right, eat the proper food, and you will find 75% of your sickness leaving you. Yes, just try it.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We are back, and I believe we have a caller on the line. So we're going to go straight to the line. Caller, you're on the air.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
Assalamu alaikum to you, brother Wasim.
Wa alaikum salam.
No, I know about community policing, I should say. Back when it was coming out of its infancy here in Chicago, about 25 years ago, I was a paid organizer through an organization called the Chicago Alliance for Neighborhood Safety. And what I did was go out into, I had a tough district to work down in the 2nd District, where the Robert Taylor Homes and the Stateway Gardens and other tall project developments were. I found that people were leery of community policing simply because they didn't know what that entailed, and that when they found out that they had work to do as a community stakeholder or person in the community that needed to know, because most people did not know that there was a role for a community to play. They knew that there was a role for police to play, but they didn't know there was a role for community to play. And so community was brought in and told what their role was. And it worked. It worked well. My point is that it was a triangular thing too. You had to bring in city services on board as well, and the people actually got success. You know, there was some successes made, and progress was being made. And what happened was the police didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that stakeholders and community people were becoming aware and involved in their own public safety, and were actually telling police how we want you to police the neighborhood, and not just your roughshod ways. And so once people learned that they had a role in community policing, the police didn't like it, and they defunded the organization that was doing such a great job of making the community aware of what their role was. So the funding goes both ways. Yes. And what they did, they focused on tasers and some rinky-dink television show called Crime Watch. You know, that's where they put the money. And so, yeah, the big deal about community policing is community. And community won't get involved until they know what you want them to do. And that's a pretty basic thing there. But it works. It works wonderfully once you get people to that certain point.
Yes, sir, brother. Thank you for that point. You make an excellent point, and we saw that here in Chicago. But I think one of the key points is that the police weren't necessarily on board with that process. And we don't want to be disillusioned, because even in Camden, it was budget cuts and they disbanded it. I mean, the people who were in power with the old way, no one likes change if it's working for you. And so, therefore, you know, that was what precipitated the new model. It had to be with the budgetary cuts and just do away with that police force. And as you said earlier, Minister Wasim, sometimes instead of repairing something, you just got to tear it down and build it back up from scratch. Yes, sir. So I think we have another caller. I want to go to the line. Caller, are you there? No? Okay. We don't have a caller. Well, Brother Minister Wasim, we've talked about this, and we have about 10 minutes left in the show. And we know that, of course, this is a big issue, but another issue that's currently, affecting so many in our community is the return back to school. Okay? And I know you serve as president of the school board there in Camden, New Jersey. So I know that you all have been busy wrestling with how to restart school there again. And so can you just give us a little insight on what you're facing there, what the plan is there, what you all are working on as the school year is set to restart there in Camden?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Jamil. And I appreciate that question, because I am, you would consider that school board president that's working. I have something special that I can say, that the only school board president that's worked in the pandemic, So that's a very challenging, as it is throughout this country, of how school's going to come back together. I know some conversations that other cities are having is about a hybrid of mixture of, virtual and in-person learning. Camden, we had decided we started off with a hybrid mode, but, now you got, with the country and the trends and, teacher unions and all of those things that are great concern and compassion, and I can definitely feel what they feel coming out of the classroom, and how teachers are so, impactful to students. And, if you're going to teach, they get so involved, but yet safety has become an issue. So we rescinded that and decided, once the governor opened up the doorway for it after feedback, that some teachers just were getting kicked. It was some communities were, falling back on that, and were just, without the governor's we're just coming in and saying, look, we're going to go remote anyhow. Mm-hmm. So Camden, who was under state control, we kind of had to wait till the governor made a move or made a statement and to open up the gateways for us to go all remote. So we're going all remote, and we're going to take another look at it in January, because, school districts, and especially school districts like Camden, are already facing certain fiscal, challenges, to some degree, without, saying, oh, we a pandemic.
Right.
This pandemic time that we've been under has can somehow a little bit work in our favor, besides the fact that our children, are not in-person learning where they can get the best in-person learning, is having a teacher and getting all the social skills, but it gives us an opportunity to, catch up on a lot of things and funding, whereas though we can reallocate funds and catch up so that our children can get the best of education that they can get. But it's challenging, having children at home. Now, as you talk about the last time that we all were home when school was in session, that the whole country was on shutdown, right?
Right.
So now, the whole country is not on shutdown. So now we have other issues with, the younger children, being able to have an opportunity to, if parents, mom or dad has to go to work and no one's there. So we have to bring community together. We have to work together as a community and neighborhoods, and making sure that certain children whose parents have to go to work now are able to get online and have access. Now we got the challenge of, do everybody have access to internet? Do everybody have access to laptops and different, learning environments? So it presents a challenge, and I think it's a great conversation for community, that our school board meetings, whether we're doing it virtually or in person, these are all of the things that we should be talking about ahead of time as school is quickly coming into session.
Yes, sir. Have there been, brother, any discussions about additional support or tutoring? I only say that because I know some adults that have been struggling with the discipline of working at home. So for a child in a new environment to be working at home, just adjusting to that and support service, because it's so, and what I'm trying to get across, and I know that you know it, but to share with our audience, is that it's more than just providing a laptop and access to the internet. That is so many components with schooling that you all have to factor in and look at and take under consideration, even for your teachers, to prepare them to teach a class remotely. It's things that people haven't done before in many cases. And so could you just talk about some of the additional support things that you all are having to look at or having to take under consideration during this time?
Yes, and one of them are like the Google Learning that they're using here in Camden. They have some great, programs on Google Learning and other apps that challenges children as they're playing certain games, that now they can do more educational things to bring it up to date. But as you said, if you have parents that have challenges, not just with time, but maybe some literacy challenges that are also very common in urban communities, I think, Brother Jamil, I think that this pandemic is going to have to join communities back to that old community concept that many of us grew up in the 60s and 70s, that we're going to have to come together. When there was issues about childcare here in New Jersey, and I'm pretty sure other states did it as well, when certain parents couldn't get to childcare centers and huge childcare centers, they started having neighborhood centers where people within their home were able to get licensed and be able to provide that kind of service. I think we're going to have to start taking a look at that educationally, that certain parents will have to get certain kind of, funding sources, since
Yes,
now
sir.
we can reallocate funds to sit in communities where, to make sure as schools have outreach to other to the communities and different people in our communities, that they're able to outreach with neighbors and neighborhoods to make sure children are not falling further and further back. And
Yes,
it's just time for us to come together as a community and think as community and not as individuals.
Yeah, and I know, brother, and we're going to wrap up on this segment. I know we're coming to an end. Another component is even the meals that children used to receiving meals at school. I mean, I know you all have to look at your budget to see, is there any thought about sending meals or delivering or,
Yes.
What does that look like for you all, brother?
Yes, we sending meals home. Well, Camden City School District, I must say, has been doing a wonderful job under the leadership of our superintendent and her staff, and being the community source, as well as the leadership of Camden here out of the office of the mayor, have been forthright in making sure that certain schools been open throughout the height of the pandemic, and to now that's able to serve meals to families and communities throughout this pandemic, and they still doing the same as well. So I know we here at the University of Islam are going to send meals home because we're going to come back in person because we are not as large as the school district. So
Yes,
we have the space and ability to social distance and to keep everybody safe, but we're still going to send our children home with meals. And I think that was one of the things we were going to do when we decided to do a hybrid model. But now those around the neighborhood, there's certain schools that are open that parents can go to and be able to get a meal for their children as well.
Okay. Brother, we're down to the last minute. I've enjoyed the conversation, but tell the people where they can hear from you on Tuesday.
Yes, and I'm very excited about this Tuesday, Brother Jamil. I'm going to have you on as a guest that we can continue this conversation. So I say to those who are viewing this here on CROE TV, tune in every Tuesday evenings at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 8:30 p.m. Central, here at Muhammad Speaks Radio on WTMRradio.com. That's WTMRradio.com, locally on the 800 dial here in the Delaware Valley, as we have been on for the past 11 years. And we're just excited. And I think after next Tuesday, I'm going to have Dr. Tyrone Powers on for continued conversation, who always give us impact and thought-provoking conversation out of Baltimore, Maryland.
All praises due to Allah, brother. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you this Tuesday evening, okay?
Yes, all praises due to Allah. Thanks for having me, and please give all the wonderful brothers and sisters the greetings there of CROE, especially the co-founders and our dear sister, Sister Nita Muhammad.
Yes, sir, I will. Brothers and sisters, thank you so much for viewing our show today. I'm your host, Jamil Muhammad, and I leave you in the greetings of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum.